Shalom, people. This is Contending for the Faith coming at you with another video. And we thank the Most High for being here today. We thank the Most High for you. And what are we going to talk about today? About a week ago, me and my wife were talking about some of the Black communities throughout the United States that had been covered over by lakes and also some of the highways, how many highways through the United States were built on top of Black communities. And my wife family were very aware of the possibility of these things happening, because I guess it was back in the early 2000s that this Chatham County wanted to build a loop going around the city of Savannah, where my wife is from, so that the rich people out there on Tybee Island wouldn't have to come through the city of Savannah. They could loop around and avoid going through the city. So what happened was, part of that highway was gonna come through where my wife's grandmother's house and other of their families had homes that had been there since the uh, early 1900s, right? And her grandmother's house in particular had been built like in the 1930s or 40s, one of those, by her brother. And they also had their church, my wife's home church that she grew up in, Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. By the way, I got married there, me and my wife. And so they was gonna have to bulldoze all that down, not to mention my wife's family's um, a cemetery. They have their own private cemetery that's been there for time immemorial. All that was going to be covered over by interstate. And so it was this rich white uh, county commissioner, Mr. McCorkle. I forgot what his first name was, but he was the only reason that didn't happen, because he was acquainted with my wife's family. My wife had, once worked for him he had a bakery there in Savannah, and that her family was kind of connected to him, through just him being the commissioner, in that part of the city. And so he spoke up on behalf of them, and for other reasons that he had. I think he also had property in that area, and he didn't want it to be destroyed also. So it worked out this time, but for the most part, this has not been the case for most of our people's history, but not just here in America, but anywhere. And so I said, well, let me go and look at this a little closer, because we know that the Most High doesn't just let things happen for any reason. And the thought came to my mind, especially when it pertains to these Black communities where they uh, either kill the people or chase the people out of the Black people out of their towns and cities that they were in, and then cover them over with water and made them into these lakes, which we're going to talk about. That when you look at the fact that when the Most High brought us out of captivity in Egypt, and he destroyed Pharaoh's army, what did he use to destroy Pharaoh's army? He used water. He used water to cover them over. And that was a sign of his judgment. So we're gonna look at the correlation between the destruction of not just our black uh, towns and cities, but we're gonna even take it back to some of the kingdoms that after our people got kicked out of uh, our land, after we got kicked out of Yasharel or Israel, and we subsequently went into other places where the Most High scattered and dispersed us to, and some of the kingdoms that we were a part of or kingdom that we created, how because of our sin, because of the things that we, did with that the Most High warned us about, how the Most High allowed anything pertaining to our existence to be covered over. So that's going to be our thought today, covered over. And when you think about covering something over, like I said, you think about people trying to erase any sign that anything had been there. You think about the great Indian civilizations that existed here on this continent, this hemisphere, how Caucasians, Europeans was able to come in and destroy many of those great Indian civilizations. You think about the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas and the great pyramids that they built. And once the European had decimated their numbers through disease and through war, how the jungle came and covered over a lot of those pyramids. Now, some of the pyramids that people see down there in Mexico and Central America and South America, the ones that they still have exhibited, is many more that are covered over by jungle. You would be amazed if you read some of the accounts, even of the mound pyramids that were here in America. That as the settlers were moving westward, and they needed farmland, how a lot of these mound pyramids were destroyed. Even here in North Carolina, where I'm from, they have a few left down in Indian Mound, North Carolina, right? But it was many more where they came in and they moved into the land, the Europeans, and they knocked and smoothed over the existence of a lot of things. But we're going to get into our lesson today. We're going to get into our lesson covered over, and we want to start with our scripture reading coming from Exodus 14, and we're going to start at verse 21. Exodus 14, starting at verse 21. And it reads, "And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the master caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, and even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch, the master looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of cloud and of the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Yasharel, for the master fighteth for them against the Egyptians. When the master said unto Moshe or Moses, stretch out thy hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the master overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned, and what covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the master saved Israel that day out of the hands of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Yasharel saw that great work which the master did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the master and believed the master and his servant Moshe. Now we see here that the Most High covered the Egyptian army in the midst of the sea. He destroyed them. He killed Pharaoh and all his army using water. And as we have seen in some of the videos that are out there on YouTube, where they have had researchers and scientists that have gone into not the Red Sea, because apparently when they translated it, the translation got misconstrued to a certain extent because of certain things, but the actual site is someplace in I forgot what is that, Al Wadi something, I can't remember the name of it, but apparently these researchers and scientists went down in this sea, and they found the chariot wheels of Pharaoh still down there, covered over, right? And again, this is a sign of a type of judgment. So when you see that fact that the Most High, in all these circumstances, we had these cities, we had these towns and the different things that we were prospering in here in the Americas, and how the Most High allowed some of these places to be covered over. We want to talk about some of these. Now, some of these definitely people I've heard about. It's not new news to some of you, but I think it bears going over since we see that school is getting ready to start back, and you have a lot of school districts throughout the country that said that they are making it illegal to talk about some of the things that these people did to us and are still yet doing to us today. But they definitely wanted to hide some of the atrocities that they did to us back in the day, some of which were the destruction of our black towns and cities. So these are some articles that I found online talking about some of the places. This is a good one right here. This comes from a site called Travel Noir, and it's by some writer named Parker Diokite, and the name of it is Five Black American Towns Hidden Under Lakes and Ultimately Through History Books. And I'm gonna try to skip through it where I'm not reading the whole thing because it's 5 pages. But if you ever get a chance to go to the site Travel Noir, I think you should pull it up. But this is Parker Diokite, And he says here, shout out to Amber Ruffin. In a video clip that has now gone viral, Ruffin kicked off a segment of her Amber Ruffin show by introducing viewers to historically Black American towns that have been destroyed and buried by a lake or natural park. They're often referred to as drowned towns. You often talked about Lake Lanier, but sadly there's plenty more where they came from. And I would dare say that even this list right here that I'm going to read off out of this article, it's 5. I'm pretty sure there's many more, but like I said, they're covered over. And unless someone comes forth with information, the Most High has allowed these things to happen. Because remember, and we're going to get to that point, how do we get here? When we start saying, right, and doing things in disobedience to Him, the things that He was doing to our enemies, now He was going to allow those things to happen to us. And one of those things was He was going to allow anything pertaining to us to be covered over. So the first place we're going to talk about is the town, Oscarville, Georgia. Which is now Lake Lanier is a popular weekend destination known for fishing, boating, and so much more, including an eerie reputation that has deemed it as haunted in Georgia. But one lesser known fact is the lake sits on top of the black town Oscarville. Oscarville was burnt down in 1912, and more than 1,000 residents were forced to flee following the allegations of RAPE. I have to be careful when we use that word on YouTube. And so this is the town that Lake Lanier covers. Lake Lanier is the lake, but the town that it covers is a place called Oscarville, Georgia. And it says here, Rob Edwards was arrested in September 1912 along with Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel, both teenagers, all accused of raping and murdering a young white woman named Maeve Crow. Edwards was dragged out of jail, beaten with a crowbar, and then lynched from a telephone pole. Daniel and Knox went to trial and were found guilty on the same day. The boys were sentenced to death by hanging. After the trials and executions, white men known as night riders forced black families out of their homes by bringing their land, forced black families out of their homes by bringing their land, churches, and schools. Once black families fled, which some people believe that some of them were killed, that some people believe the whole population of the town. I don't necessarily think that actually happened, that they killed 1,000 people and covered them over with the lake. I think some of them could have been killed, but not 1,000. But let's keep reading. The Lake Lanier was built on top of what was burnt down. So Oscarville was the town that Lake Lanier was built over. Once was home to 1,000 black people who were prosperous, but on the allegations, false allegations that were brought against three young black men who were subsequently lynched. After that, the Night Riders, clan, whatever they were, had their provocation to chase our people out of where they had rightfully been there, not bothering anybody, to chase them out of there. And subsequently, when it was time for them to create a recreation site, because they got to have their recreation sites, they covered it over and named the place Lake Lanier. The next place was a place called Walaga, Alabama. So it turns out Alabama's Lake Lanier is built on the previous majority black town of Callawalaga. It is home to the first black-owned railroad started by William E. Benson in the black school Callawalaga Academy and Industrial Institute. William is the son of John Benson, who was enslaved and then freed. He went on a journey to rescue his sister in Florida, who was separated during slavery, and they made their way back to Alabama. John purchased thousands of acres of land sold to black families, where he formed a community. William helped his dad expand the business. After William's death and the closing of school, Callawalaga was destroyed, or Benson, as it's called, was destroyed to make room for Lake Martin. Okay, so Lake Martin is the one for Alabama. Lake Lanier is for Georgia, and they basically, I guess, I don't know if the people were still living in Callawalaga at the time that they destroyed it. It doesn't really say. But we're going to keep moving on. And everyone knows about this next one I'm getting ready to talk about. Seneca Village in New York City. It just says it began in 1825, and at its peak, it spanned from 82nd Street to 89th Street along what is now the eastern edge of Central Park in New York City. It said by the 1840s, half of the African Americans who lived there owned their own property, a rate 5 times higher than the city average. It says in 1857, Seneca Village was torn down for the construction of Central Park. The only thing that remains is the commemorative plaque dedicated in 2001 to the lost village. And they said that New York wanted to have a place, wanted to be like all the other great metropolitan cities of the world at that time, and they needed to have a place of recreation, a place for them to step back away from the concrete jungle. And so they looked at our people's area, and they said it was a slum and condemned it, and they had riots and chased the people out, and basically, again, covered it over with trees, not water. Okay, then there's a place called, next one is Susanna, Alabama, or Sasua was also flooded by Lake Martin. So Lake Martin didn't take out just one town, it took out 2 towns. One was Callawalaga, and the other one was this place called Susanna. It said, according to Alabama Living, more than 900 bodies were moved from cemeteries before the land was submerged. I don't believe they stated it. Who's to say? I don't know. But they said they had a black cemetery where they had to remove 900 bodies. I know when my wife, like I said, they had their situation. They was, they was actually going to be right on top of their graveyard, on top of their community. But let's keep going. He said the town once included a gold mine, a school, 2 mercantiles, a grist mill, a flour mill, a sawmill, a blacksmith shop, and a church. Okay, so the fifth, the last one in this article is someplace called Vanport, Oregon. Vanport, Oregon. It said in the 1940s, Vanport was the center of a booming shipyard industry because of World War II, and quickly became the second largest city in the state, right? He said with soldiers being drafted overseas to fight in a war, Oregon saw a labor shortage. This resulted in a great migration of Black Americans from the South. These new workers needed places to live, as the Albany neighborhood was the only place where blacks could live legally. It became too small for the growing population of Black Americans, and Van Wert was built as a temporary housing solution. At its peak, 40,000 residents, or 40%, were African Americans. But then in 1948, massive flooding interrupted erupted in the neighborhood, and city officials didn't warn residents of the dangerously high water levels. Many didn't whoa, Many didn't evacuate in time. The town was wiped out within a day. It says here 18,500 families were displaced, more than a third being Black American. Today, that area is known as Delta Park. It's covered over. Like I said, I believe that it's much, much more cities and towns in this place where we had, but the Most High had warned us that if we didn't keep His commandments, we didn't do what He told us to do, that He would wipe out our remembrance. He would cover us over. Let's see what Deuteronomy 32:18 says about this. He warned us about this. Deuteronomy 32 and verse 18 says, of the rock that begot thou art unmindful, and has forgotten Yah that formed thee. And when the master saw it, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be, for they are a very fourth generation, children in whom there is no faith. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not Yah, and have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people, and I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. For a fire is kindled in my anger, and will burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and shall set on fire the foundations of the mountains. I will heap mischief upon them. I will spread my arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger, and devoured with burning heat and bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them, with the poison of serpents of the dust. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hairs. I said, I will scatter them into the corners. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. And with all these, some of these that I read, some of these things were erased from memory, because a lot of our people, when they would flee, when they would got to wherever it was and where they was fleeing from this destruction, a lot of times, if their children would, they would say, we are never gonna mention what happened back there where we were at, all the stuff that we did, all what you seen, your friends, our property, everything. We're not gonna talk about it. It's just gonna be water under the bridge. We're not gonna talk about it. And it got covered over, except for the fact that these people like to put stuff in books. They like to keep history. So yes, it was covered over to a certain extent time, but now that the time of the Gentiles is coming to an end, now the Most High is allowing it to be uncovered. But at the time, while we was going through our punishment, He allowed it to be covered up. And like I said, I don't believe that these 5 that I mentioned are the only. I'm pretty sure there's many, many others, just like what I stated to you at the beginning about possibly what could have happened to my wife's family's property down there in Savannah, Georgia. I'm pretty sure there was other places with them building that highway in Savannah where it was some black neighborhoods that got covered over because the majority of population, at least at one time when I was there, of Savannah was black people. But now with gentrification coming in, also that is also destroying a lot of our history, whether good or bad, in the black communities that some of you grew up. There are stuff just being covered over, right? But this is what the Most High said. He said, if you did not remember the rock, and it had the rock with the capital R, meaning that the divinity of the angel, the messenger of the Most High, Yah, the one that Moses was supposed to. The Moses said that there's one that's gonna come after me, that's gonna be like me. Him you will hear. He was already in existence. Yeshua didn't come into existence in Bethlehem. He was already in existence from the very foundations of the earth. And he was the one that led Moshe through he was that rock. Because what did the Bible say? He said he was that rock. He is the rock of our salvation. And that's why when Moses struck the rock, instead of speaking to the rock, he said you have not brought glory to me, because that rock represented the Yeshua. And that no, Moses didn't. And what did Yeshua say when he fed the people? He said it wasn't Moses that fed you with the manna. He said the manna came down out of heaven from the Father. So it wasn't Moses that fed you manna. He wasn't the one that fed you angels. That was me, right? And so when Moses doing that and taking the emphasis off that rock of their salvation, putting on him, he was bringing disrespect, him and Aaron, to Yeshua, and therefore because of that, he was not able to get into the land. And so the Bible say here in Deuteronomy that the people were disrespecting the rock. They was not giving no credence to Yeshua. They was not giving credence to his presence being there, right? Pillar of fire by night, cloud by day, tabernacle there, Yah speaking from the mountain, even showing himself to Moshe and the elders in the mountain. He was doing all these different things, and yet they were sinning against him while they was in the desert for those 40 years. And he said, this continued pattern of what you're doing is going to cause me to gather you into the four corners of the earth and blot out the remembrance of you in the places where you're going. And this is what I'm trying to show today, even that when the slave trade, and a lot of people didn't know this, I didn't realize this, but the majority of the people that was in the transatlantic slave trade went into South America. Millions upon millions of our people went in there. And what happened, the Europeans, in particular the Spanish and the Portuguese, came up with this strategy called branqueamento, or whitening out. And one of the ways that they deleted so many of our people down there in South America was through a war. And most of their wars, they said that the warriors that they brought from Europe, the conquistadors, a lot of those conquistadors or hired soldiers or conscripted soldiers that went down there to fight against those great Indian kingdoms, the Mayans, the Incas, the Aztecs, were African, were black, right? That they conscripted. And also when they created their different nations down there, Peru and Argentina and all these different places, and they were fighting against each other. Most of their armies was made up of these black slaves, right? That they would put into their armies, and they would fight. And it got so bad in Argentina that they destroyed a major portion of the black males down there through war down there. It was some war that they fought with another South American country. I can't remember it right now. So much so that it was just mostly black women that were left, and because of that, they said they would bring Europeans from. They would ask Europeans from other European countries to come over there, and how that pretty much whited out a lot of Argentina, where it is a lot of places, a lot of people don't even realize that it was even any black people over there, because they was pretty much wiped. The only the thing now is you got some Africans that are actually fleeing from Africa into South America, right? That's kind of bringing the subject back up because of their treatment from the Argentine government and peoples. But for the most part, they blotted it out. The only place where you really, where it's hard for them to do that is Brazil and Colombia, places like that, where there's still a lot of our people still left there. But for the most part, they have covered it over, even for the fact that the music, a lot of the food, and all these different things can be attributed to the African slaves that were brought there. But for the most part, the Most High has allowed it to be covered over, right? And so we look at these things and see that the Most High's word is true, that because of what we did here, allowed the remembrance of us to be wiped out. But we're gonna get back to here in America, because remember I said not just lakes that they use to cover up a lot of our towns, but also highways, like what I was stating to you at the beginning about my wife's family's land and church and all these things. And I got a article here that I want to read. I'm not going to read all of it, of course, but it's from Reuters. It's from 2021, and it's by a guy named Andy Sullivan, and it's called U.S. Highways Flatten Black Neighborhoods Nationwide. And it says here, across the country, let me start. Okay, Syracuse. Okay, so he's reporting out of Syracuse. It says Syracuse wasn't the only city where black residents were displaced by the U.S. freeway building boom of the 1950s and 60s, which it was, by the way, called the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 by President Eisenhower, because he wanted to be able to connect the one end of America to the other in case a large, not just for commercial reasons, definitely for commercial reasons, to tie all the states together and to make interstate commerce more profitable, right? But also militarily wise, he wanted to be able to get a army from one end of America to the other using just roads, just in case air cover would not be enough to get. He wanted to be able to connect, and they realized it was going to take decades. So they started in the 1950s, and I think they said that the act ran all the way up into I can remember the 80s. Could have been more, but I think they had to do some more bills or whatever, because the money that they allocated for that was going to run out in like the 1980s or something like that. Because I can remember seeing some of the highways where in the 80s where they had started and they had stopped, and because of funding. But the big boom of highways ran from the 1950s all the way to like the late 70s, early 80s. But anyway, it says here, it's across the country, local officials saw proposed interstate systems as a convenient way to demolish what they regarded as slum neighborhoods near downtown districts. Um, they said the federal government picked up 90% of the cost of the federal highways, right? Um, and they encouraged the towns where they were building these highways. They encouraged the cities and towns to pursue their own urban renewal projects, meaning they was going to leave it up to them to say, hey, okay, what is the best place to run these highways through? And so they looked upon our neighborhoods as the ones that they were going to run these highways through, or divide the our neighborhoods off from the businesses and downtowns, putting a highway between us and them, or as you will hear people say, uh, they living on the other side of the railroad tracks per se, because the interstate highway also dealt with rails also. But it says here, one of the places that they ultimately did the destruction of these black neighborhoods was pretty much along racial lines. And that's not to say that it was some white neighborhoods that they didn't have to get rid of to build highways, but they targeted our neighborhoods. And so here's a few of the towns that I found, and I'm sure there's many more. But one of the places that they said that they built major highways through booming black towns, was this place down near Miami called Overtown, Florida. They built I-95 over that, or pretty much divided it over. And really, my understanding, all up and down the I-95 corridor, that it's not just Overtown that they built 95 over, but it was many other towns along the Gullah Geechee Trail, or the place where the 40 acres and a mule, even though some of the land was swampy or whatever, but through a lot of these places along the I-95 corridor, they used to be Gullah Geechee towns. Another one was North Nashville. It was a black neighborhood there, a thriving neighborhood in North Nashville, that they built I-40 over. Parts of Montgomery, Alabama, where there were black neighborhoods and towns, they built I-85 over. In St. Paul, Minnesota, there was a black neighborhood called Rondo. They built I-94 over that. In Syracuse, New York, where the writer of this article was writing from, it was a black neighborhood called the Fifth Ward, and I've been to Syracuse. A lot of runaway slaves ran up into Syracuse, New York, and a lot of people during the Northern Migration moved into Syracuse, New York. They built I-81 over some of those neighborhoods that those people had moved in. Another place was some neighborhoods in Birmingham, Alabama, that they built I-59 over. Greenwood, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street that they had destroyed. Well, they didn't just destroy it, but some years later, they said that they also built 2 highways over portions of the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma, I-244 and I-75. They built highways over. And so again, Most High, he said, in one of the scriptures in Deuteronomy, he said, he said, I'm gonna cast you out into the lands of your captivity. He said, and when you get there, I'm gonna get a sword after you. So here again, like I said, he allowed these people to chase us out of a lot of these places and to cover over our memory, right? And in some places, right, where our people was over, they didn't even remove the graves. That one where they said in Lake Martin they removed 900 graves. I don't believe that, because me and my wife was looking at something a couple of months ago where they was going back and they was having they was doing some research over some of these highways, and they had found that a lot of these highways had been built right on top of the graveyards of not just of us, but also of Indian people, their burial grounds and all this, which is for some reason that's a popular thing for them to go into sacred grounds, whether or not, we know they worshiping false deities, we know that, but you know what I'm saying, but just the disrespect of the day that they'll do that, right? And so this is what the Most High again said in Psalms. Let's go to Psalms 106, because he warned us. He told us these things was going to happen. Psalms 106 and 10 says this. He says, and he saved them from the hand of him that hated them, and redeemed them from the hand of their enemy. And the waters covered their enemies. There was not one of them left. This is what he did to our enemies. But because we were not obedient to him, he flipped the script and allowed us to be hated, allowed us to fall into the hands of our enemies, and allow us to be covered over in the waters of our enemies. Because not just with water, but also highways, parks, businesses, covered over housing developments. Was this thing of gentrification that they're doing throughout the nation right now, or even the thing with the what happened in 2008, where a lot of people losing their houses because there's adjustable rate mortgages, and they had their houses taken over, right? And now, people will never be able to go into home ownership again. They'll be living from pillar to post, apartments, whatnot, or living with relatives or whatever. And now, we even think about what happened with Katrina, where they went into some of the Ninth Ward, and they said some of the people never came back, right? And so now the memory of, not that the Ninth Ward did not have its problems. We obviously know that before Katrina, they had a lot of crime and everything that was there, although I don't believe that it started out that way. I'm pretty sure it was a place where the slaves were once at. But now, if things continue to go its way, it's going to become like our people were never in some parts of there in New Orleans, right? But not just here in America, but also back in Africa, right? Some of the before slavery, before the Berlin Conference, our people were over certain kingdoms and were parts of certain kingdoms over there, right? Before the Berlin Conference. Think about what the Berlin Conference did. The Berlin Conference did away with a lot of kingdoms there in Africa. Here's just a mention of some of the kingdoms that were existing shortly before the Berlin Conference, when they came in and they divided it up, right? Without the African people having anything. Now we you know what, I believe that the majority of the continent is the land of Ham. That although I believe that our people are there in large numbers, right? For the most part, I think most of it is the land of Ham. But for the most part, where our people and where some of the definitely where the Hamitic people are at, it was covered over or divided up. Some of the kingdoms that existed before the Berlin Conference, that they, slowly dwindled away and put split tribes by national borders, was the Ashanti Kingdom, the Dahomey Kingdom. Now, one of the biggest kingdoms that I seen before the Berlin Conference was this kingdom called Sudan, or Soudan, as some people pronounce it. It extended from parts of West Africa all the way almost into East Africa, of what we so the country of Sudan is what is left of it, but Sudan stretched from West Africa through the Sahara and all the way almost into East Africa, right? They divided the Kingdom of Congo, the Kingdom of Congo, which is where my great grandmother came from what it was called Congo, then Zaire, but the Congo was very big, and they split that into different parts of the French, Belgium, Congo, all that. They split that up. Upper Guinea and Lower Guinea, which is the west coast of Africa. They divided that up. And in the East Africa, they had, before Tanzania existed, it was the Kingdom of Zanzibar, right? Which was Muslim, still part of the Ottoman Empire. But they divided all these things up, and although the tribes of people are still there, right? And they do retain knowledge of their history in their minds, but a lot of their artifacts and things like that, the Europeans, when they divided these kingdoms up, they came in and made them start speaking their language. Some of them lost their language. They came in and took a lot of their art. They came in and took their articles of power. Remember what they did with the Benin bronze? They came in and took the group that there was a wall that was built in what part of West Africa it was, but this wall that had been built by this particular tribe, it was longer than the Great Wall of China. The British came in when they colonized West Africa. I forgot what country it was, but they destroyed this wall. There's portions of it still left, but they destroyed it. They came in, and then some of the things, like what the French did to Egypt with the noses of the Sphinx and all that. They shot noses off, and we know what the Arabs, which means mixed people, came into Egypt and other places up in there, and said that we are the original people, and that these dark Africans did not build this, right? So covered over. They have been allowed for right now to come, but now that we're living in an age of knowledge that Daniel talked about, he said Daniel was told by the angel Gabriel, he said, all these things that you're seeing, he said, seal up the book, right? Don't let them be revealed. He said, in the end, knowledge is going to increase, right? We know that back before C-19 came out in 2019, the Vatican was going to open up its library to the public. And so all this information that is still leaking out, by the way, they was going to make access to it, supposedly. But now right? The C-19 came and travel was shut down. All this and what happened when our people start rising up and saying, "Hey, we want to know more about these different things that happened to us. We want reparations." All of a sudden, all these school systems said, not only do we not want you to know the actual history of what happened here in America, even a little bit of the history that we were teaching, which was misconstrued and was kind of bent on a lot of falsehoods. We're gonna even corrupt that and say, you know what? These slaves, they actually benefited from coming here, right? And so all these things, the Most High said was going to happen to us because we were not going to be obedient to Him. Look what He said here in Jeremiah 17, and we're going to get ready to end. But Jeremiah 17 and verse 1 says this. He said, "The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron and with the point of a diamond. It is graven upon the table of their heart and upon the horns of your altars. While their children remember their altars and their groves by the green trees upon the high hills. O my mountain in the field, I will give thy substance and all thy treasure to the spoil, and thy high places for sin throughout all thy borders. And thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thy inheritance that I gave thee, and I will cease thee to serve, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in a land which thou knowest not. For you have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever." He said He was going to scatter us into the land of our enemies and cause our heritage to cease, to discontinue. And they had, someone was so, food, although they had books and everything that said to the contrary. But they had us thinking that they captured us in Africa swinging from trees and came here, got us here to America and civilized us. And all this stuff about the great kingdoms that we were part of, and even in my generation, not knowing about Greenwood and all these different towns and stuff. Now, of course, like I told you, I see little glimpses of it, when I was growing up. But for the most part, you had to learn that stuff on your own, right? They hid it. The Most High allowed them to cover it over. But now we're living in a time where things are being revealed. But with that revelation comes responsibility to not go back to the sins that we did that got us into the first place and almost got us wiped off the map, right? Because look at the Indians. They're just a shred of what they were, but the Most High did not allow that to totally. The Bible said, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Didn't mean that some of the weapons would not be yielded against you, would do some damage. It is done some damage, but He is not totally allowed it to annihilate us. But for a part, He has allowed certain things to be covered over. But the Bible said that which was hidden shall be revealed. And we're seeing that in the times that we're living in. So even though our children are going back to school, all my kids graduated, they're adults now. But I would say to you, now that they're going back to school, we as Black people, as Hebrew people, should talk even louder about our history. Those things that they have covered, we need to uncover, because the Most High has given us that power now to come back and to be a voice for those that did not have a voice, those who had homes under Lake Martin and Lake Lanier that were chased out, had highways built over their thing. But we have to do it in righteousness. We can't just talk about it, right? We got to do the things that we need to do so that the Most High won't allow our enemies to get the advantage over us because of us disobeying His laws and being sinful. because you can think about what he did to the Noah's on the other people on the other side of the flood. When the flood came in, it covered some of those civilizations so deep. Some of them are under the bottom of the ocean. Right? They found pyramids 2,000 feet below Cuba. Right? They was exploring oil. They seen these vast cities. The Most High covered them and never allowed no knowledge of them to ever come up, because he said, okay, I'm gonna do this. He said, but I'm not gonna destroy the earth for that sake. But that on the other side of the flood, some of that stuff we ain't gonna learn about until the Most High tells us about it, because he wanted to be like that. And for a portion of our time in our captivity in Jacob's trouble that we've been going through, he has allowed that to happen. But now he is blessing some of us to uncover some of this stuff that he allowed to be covered over. But we gotta do it in righteousness. So with that, I'm going to ask you to continue to pray my strength in the Most High. I want you to give this video a thumbs up. I want you to subscribe. I want you to leave a comment. I want you to look at some of my earlier work. I got over 300 some videos, and I think you probably definitely find something in there to your liking. So with that, I'm going to ask you to continue to have a good day of rest. Be blessed.